Boris Johnson is legally correct. And there's a very good report by the House of Lords European Scrutiny Committee, which set out that if we leave without a deal, under EU, international and UK law, we owe no money. And that's a very good starting point.
So without a deal, is
without a deal, that's right. So then you're saying, what is it in our interest to pay to get certain other elements that we want? But their starting negotiation position from the EU point of view is they have no legal basis for demanding these payments.
No, but they're saying that is the gateway to getting a deal, and you want a deal, don't you? Or would you like no deal?
They're saying a moral obligation. But a moral obligation ranks for less than a legal obligation.
No, but they're also saying that's how we can part as friends. I mean, what's your personal view? I mean, we have entered into obligations, haven't we?
The obligations cease on the day we leave the European Union. That's completely clear.
Even for programmes which are continuing to run?
If we want to maintain part of specific programmes, that's clearly different. The Erasmus programme, the Horizon 2020 programme, I have no difficulty with us continuing to contribute to those. There is then a negotiation on what Brexit looks like. And if money oils the wheels, we have it, they want it, but we should make sure we get a great deal in return for that.
Power grab by the executive. It's not giving power back to the sovereign parliament.
I think that's a misunderstanding of what's happening. This is a two-stage process. Currently, all those powers are with Brussels. They will come back to Westminster, and from there, I hope and expect many of them will be devolved, and that will be a matter of discussion between the devolved parliaments and the United Kingdom Parliament. And Parliament will then determine what laws are made in future, because as was established, yes it will.
If the secondary powers are used by the government,
secondary legislation always goes through Parliament. Now, sometimes, yes it does, even on a negative resolution, if enough MPs object to a secondary resolution...
Completely wrong. Sorry, Jacob.
No. The government cannot resist a prayer against...
Jacob, I'm sorry, I'm going to correct you, because in 2014-15, there were 19 prayers against, and not a single one led to a vote.
But the 19 prayers did not have a majority of Parliament praying against it.
So you've got to have a majority.
No,
that's the government.
No, what I'm saying is that for secondary legislation there always has to be either the tacit or implicit consent of Parliament.
But
that is always the case.
The only way you can assess whether there's the assent of Parliament is if you have a vote and a debate. And the government over the last 2 years simply hasn't been allowing us to do it.
326 MPs to support a prayer against a negative instrument, you would find that there was a vote in Parliament invariably. As it happens, I do agree with you that the government should be more open to allowing prayers against the negative resolutions when signed by leading figures in the opposition.
Can I be helpful, and just to help, could we conclude?
The British people have voted to leave, the House of Commons has voted to leave, Professor Grayling wants us to stay. I'm with the majority.
May I? Because this phrase, the British people, I do think it's the most terrific catchphrase. We're really talking about a quarter of the population when you sum up who that 37% of the restricted franchise was.
Well, I think this is such nonsense. The figure gets lower and lower for Professor Grayling's convenience. The British people voted in a fair election, and a majority voted to leave.
A minority
I think to call
of them
the British people is extremely fair.
A minority of them did, and I have to say, with very great respect, that to see an old Etonian stockbroker on the far right of the Tory party representing himself as a tribune of the people, representing the interests of car workers in Sunderland, is mildly implausible.
Are you being Etonist?
What I want to say is that this
that
referendum was
either the professor of the New College of the Humanities or I should throw stones at each other about our backgrounds.
Well,
particularly.
Let me say this: that it's not the people that Mr. Rees-Mogg is representing; it's his people. Because the kind of Britain that he wants, a low-tax Britain, a Britain where there isn't enough money for the NHS and for state education and for welfare and for environmental protection.
If we don't give it to the EU.
Well, you want to privatise it. I mean, you don't use it, so you want to privatise it.
I don't privatise the NHS. I've never argued for the privatisation of the NHS. You're putting words into my mouth.
What does this word mean?
The act or habit of estimating as worthless.
Estimating something is worthless.
Yes. And what was the word? Just remind me.
Can you give me the Latin derivation?
Oh, well, no, not offhand.
Can't you? Why not? You use words and you can't give the proper derivation.
Well, I don't always have to give the etymology of every word I use, but I can pronounce it.
I mean, everyone knows it comes from flockeye, meaning a whisper, a piece of wool, knockeye, meaning a trifle, and Pillai means nothing, and Pillai meaning hair or something insignificant. I mean, it could have been Flossie or non faccio. What does that mean?
I couldn't give a straw.
That's the literal interpretation.
I know, yes. If you were being rude, you might say I couldn't give a damn,
indifference.
but I wouldn't be
Why
so
didn't you
rude
use the smaller one rather than the longer one?
I didn't think of it, actually. Floxy knocking nihilopilification came to mind, as it does from time to time.
Does it often come to your mind?
It's one of those words I've known since I was a schoolboy.
When it comes to your mind, is there room for anything else in your mind?
Lots, and particularly pointing out that what we are wanting to indulge in the Floxy knocking nihilopilification of, which is the European Court of Justice, which is the key point. That
Not the
judges,
European Court in Strasbourg.
No.
The one in Luxembourg.
The ECJ ruled to their own benefit that the pay rises of European officials had to go through, and that included their own pay. And this is against one of the most important principles of justice, that you should not be a judge in your own cause. And thankfully, using this odd word has got some attention to that tremendously important point of corruption in the law courts of Europe. And it's
okay,
very
you made
important
that point,
to get
and you
that
made
point.
it in the
Chapman, who was the Chief of Staff in the Government Department for leaving the European Union, has said Brexit is a catastrophe and a new party should be set up to oppose it. It would be called the Democrats. He's floated the idea on Twitter, says he's surprised by the level of support he's received. He's on the line, so is Jacob Rees-Mogg, Conservative MP and, of course, prominent Brexiteer. James Chapman, it's being reported that you have had 7 ministers contacting you, including 2 cabinet ministers, who are sympathetic to this idea. Really?
Well, they're not all ministers, John, but yes, two people in the cabinet now, a number of people who've been in Conservative cabinets before now, better cabinets, I might say, than the current one. And a number of shadow cabinet ministers have also been in touch. I mean, they're not saying that they're going to quit their parties, but they're saying they understand that there's an enormous gap in the centre now of British politics, which has been look. The 2 main parties have been captured by their fringes.
All right, but hang on, before you.
Jacob's a member of that fringe. He's captured my party, and I don't any longer want to be a part of it.
But you worked for him.
I didn't work for Jacob, and I never.
Oh, Jacob! I thought you said David, right? Because you worked, of course, for David Davis.
I did.
Who presumably doesn't go along with you entirely, as it were.
No, I'm sure he doesn't.
And you're wholly opposed. But this idea that there are 2 cabinet ministers who are sympathetic to you, I mean, would they even contemplate leaving the party to form another party? I mean, that could bring down the government.
I think, John, my view is that the Conservative Party brand has now been damaged to such an extent that the party won't be elected again and ever again get a majority. So, and look, there are times in our national life when you have to put your nation before your country. And what the hard Brexit plan that Mrs May is pursuing is going to take our economy off a cliff. It's going to make Black Wednesday look like a picnic.
All right.
And when that happens, the Conservative Party will never be in power again. So actually, if you are a cabinet minister thinking you're contemplating this as a disaster, and don't forget that 60% of the Tory parliamentary party will remain. And they're paralysed.
OK, well, Jacob...
They won't say what they think.
Right, Jacob Rees-Mogg, first of all, do you accept that there is this extreme level of discontent in the party and at the very, very top level in the cabinet?
I'd be very surprised, but bear in mind the effective Deputy Prime Minister, Damien Green, is somebody who has historically been strongly in favour of the European Union, and yet is playing an absolutely crucial role.
Hang on, James, let Jacob talk.
But is playing a crucial role in ensuring that government policy is delivered. I think most people in the higher levels of the party and across the Conservative Party in the nation have accepted the democratic result of the referendum a year ago. And opinion polls show this. About 70% of people just want Brexit to be delivered, however they voted a year ago, because most people accept democracy. And what's so peculiar about this new party is it wants to call itself the Democrats, and the first thing it wishes to do is to overturn a democratic decision.
Well, it's not actually a party yet, is it? It's just a dream.
Well, proposed party. But their proposed name ought to be the oligarchs rather than the Democrats.
Right. And that is...
Jacob, you'd know about them. I mean, I would just say that David Davis, I respect...
Not the circles I mix in.
I respect. Well, I'm sure. I respect and admire David Davis. He said only 5 years ago, in a democracy, people have the right to change their minds. And the point about this is, Jacob, people have voted for Brexit, and yes, most people do now think, well, let's just get on with it. We made the decision, but they've been sold a pack of lies. Where is the £350 million a week for the health service?
And when you said all of this to David Davis when you worked for him, what did he say to you?
Well, he wants to get on with the job. And so do the civil servants who Jacob denigrates day in, day out, who are working very hard to deliver something they know is undeliverable and is going to be a calamity for our country.
I haven't said anything about civil servants, so it's better not to attribute views to people when you don't know what they've said. But the Democratic vote was not only last year, it was also this year. The Lib Dems campaigned on a proposal effectively to reverse the referendum result, and the electorate blew a raspberry at them.
But you
they also blew a
hang on, James, hang on.
There's no... Well, they didn't actually. The Conservatives got more votes than at any point since 1983.
You have no mandate
Jacob
Rees-Mogg. You've got no mandate for a hard Brexit. The British people have just rejected
all right,
it.
Hang on a moment, James, please. Let him speak. Jacob Rees-Mogg, you would accept, would you not, that there are very clear divisions within your party?
I think the party has broadly united around the position of leaving the European Union, which is what the electorate voted for, and there is not hard or soft Brexit. There is either leaving the European Union or remaining within it. And what's so interesting about what Mr. Chapman is saying...
James, really, let him finish his sentence.
What Mr. Chapman is saying, is postulating, is once again wrapping up a soft Brexit, remaining in the European Union. We're getting these scare stories again. We had those a year ago. As it happens, the economy did not collapse after we voted to leave the European Union, which was what, which is, yes, it is. Yesterday, we saw an 11.4% increase in our global trade.
All right, sorry, we have neither time nor the inclination to debate all the intricacies of Brexit. The question at the moment, James Chapman. The question at the moment is whether there really is the support of your party, your proposed party, this new Democrats party that you're claiming for it. What's the evidence? Just in a few sentences, if you would, because you're about out of time. What is the evidence for this support?
As I say, there is a gap in the centre of British politics. An enormous number of people now have been left politically homeless by the extremists who have seized control of the two main parties.
All right, let me just ask you one more question then. Let me just ask you one more question, James Chapman. Is George Osborne behind this? Because you worked pretty closely, very closely with him. You were one of his spies. Is he behind it?
No, not at all. I haven't spoken to George about this.
You haven't?
I think he's having a great deal of fun editing the Evening Standard, which is now the best newspaper in Fleet Street, and causing mayhem for Jacob and his colleagues.
There we are. We'll have to...